So with like the genre of action writing, like I don't necessarily want to read, a massive block of text like that when I'm describing a big action scene. So I try to keep it short, try to keep it moving.
How do you approach writing a scene?
I always look at it as I want to make sure I have conflict, and I try to think about the character's goals for the story and moving the story forward. I want to make sure that every scene is moving the story forward in some way. Not a lot of, I think sometimes when you read a new writer, there won't be a lot of conflict in the dialogue, and sometimes there'll be a lot of just kind of back and forth, and you start to wonder, like, where is this going? So when I'm trying to approach a scene, it's figuring out what does the character want, what is the goal of the scene, how do we move things forward, and then figuring out what is that conflict in that scene. And also, I think with writing individual scenes, it's trying to figure out a fun spin on whatever you're doing. If you're setting if you're in a small room, it's figuring out, is there something we can do here we haven't necessarily seen before? Can we use the environment in a fresh way? So I think those are the main things that I'm thinking about.
And when you are writing a scene, have you ever stopped yourself and said, you know what, this is going to cost too much money, like we're going to need these types of cars or this type of environment, and it's probably going to make the budget?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because I during COVID, I produced a horror film that I co-wrote. So that was an interesting part of it was, me like wearing the writer hat and wearing the producer hat's very different, where we had to cut out, a couple kind of gnarly action horror elements out of it, just because it was a budgetary thing, it was a time thing. So I think that it's just figuring out what is the objective of your script. If you're writing something that's going to be super fun, a big budget movie, an action film, I think go for it with those big action scenes, and hopefully you have someone working with you who can kind of tone it down a little bit. But I mean, it is good to keep in the back of your mind, don't have a plane crash. Always think about animals. Horses are expensive. Everything is expensive with animals. So that's a good thing to remember too. But yeah, I think in the back of my mind, a lot of times when I'm coming up with a story concept, it's figuring out I think this has potential to be made, and it's not going to cost $100 million. So I think that's a fun part of screenwriting, is that element of trying to figure out how can this get made too.
Just going back to Hot Seat for a minute, when I watched the trailer, it seems like a very big film.
Yeah.
Were elements added later that made it bigger?
There's some, there's some special effects, there's some explosions, but man, James did a great job directing it, just keeping the pace so fast. Right. Cutting in and out of this room we're in, cutting out to the police officers outside, that made it feel a lot bigger than it was. That was a testament to him directing it. And also that was something we really had to keep in mind when we were writing it, was okay, we got a guy with his chair. He's working on a computer. He's doing some hacking stuff. But it's how can you keep that fun and fresh? Whether it's cutting to police outside, cutting to his family, cutting to something crazy going on at another location. But there's not that many locations in Hot Seat, but it definitely feels bigger than what we wrote.
Do you worry about scenes or the entire movie dragging, or do you worry about them being too fast?
I think for me, I'm always worried about things being too slow. So I like to, get out of the scene as quick as possible, get into a scene as late as possible. And then I think I'm always trying to just keep things moving, driving forward, keep the train rolling. But I think there are times when it's you need to take a minute, you need to take a break from doing the action scenes. You need to really emphasize the characters so we care about them. And if that means that we've had a crazy action scene, now we need to kind of slow it down. So I think it's just kind of getting that rhythm and that pacing. It's almost in some ways it's like music in that way, the pacing and the flow of a script, because if there's so much action, people will tune out. So I think it's just finding those good breaks in between a scary moment or an action moment, and just reminding yourself to ground it in this character and this character's journey, and making us care about them.
Right, because I'm thinking like The Bourne Identity, it slows down only when there's like sentimental moments within the relationship.
Yeah.
And then maybe even with the girl with the dragon tattoo, it slows down when you kind of like realize sort of a human moment for those characters.
I would say with the scripts that I've done, I feel like that's a similar pattern of, slowing the pace down a little bit, making sure we still have those intimate moments with a character to learn about them, or to learn about, if there's a love interest, to really kind of slow the pace down, reconnect with them before we hit the audience with something crazy again.
Does it bother you if something moves too slowly? Is it kind of like, even in your own, like, I'm irritated by that.
I don't
speed
mind.
it up.
I think every film is so different. You go see a 3-hour epic in theaters that's this heavy drama. I mean, you kind of are expecting something a little bit slower to build. When it comes to action, for me, I like things to move fast. I love going to the movie and it's like a tight 90 minutes. Like, I love that. Doesn't need to be like a 2.5-hour action movie. I like fast pace, but with my own writing, I think it's just trying to find that balance of like, we want to have a crazy horror sequence, but also balance that with the character thing. But for me, I'm honestly just trying to move it forward, keep the pages of the script turning, and keep people engaged as much as possible. Just because I feel like we have our cell phones, we have Instagram, we have all these apps that are like so short attention wise.
Right.
So I think it's important to just keep things really flowing so people don't tune out.
Right, yeah, and I feel like they definitely have trained our brains to change.
Sure.
But there's something for me, I love like Oppenheimer or Tree of Life or something where it breathes on screen. But do you feel restless during films like that?
No, I just recently saw The Brutalist, and that's a 3-hour plus movie. But I loved how they let things build in that. I loved exploring the characters, exploring the environments. I think it just depends on the type of film you're getting into. If it's more of a prestigious movie versus something that's a horror movie that takes place in a cabin. Like, I feel like you want that to be fun and fresh and move. But no, I don't think I get too restless in movies. Unless, I feel like a 90-minute movie can be extremely boring, and I feel like a 3-hour movie can be extremely exciting. I think that just comes down to, the writing and the directing and getting us engaged. Because like, I really enjoyed The Brutalist, and that was 3 hours, and I felt like, I didn't look at my phone. There wasn't that kind of like, how long is this? And then other movies, which I won't name, it's like, oh wow, 10 minutes in, you're like, oh wow, this is gonna be a long one.
Sure. How do you handle writing room descriptions?
Room descriptions?
Yeah.
Man, I love the art of scene description in scripts, and there's so many writers who are so great at it. I just remember like when first moving to Los Angeles, reading like Shane Black Lethal Weapon script, and he had so much voice to his characters, had so much voice to his descriptions, and with me, I try to keep things, action line wise, one or two lines, and then keep it moving. So I'm pretty bare bones when it comes to just describing a location. I feel like I'll let the production designer kind of take that on, or the director, unless there's something really important in the scene. Then I'll get very detailed. But I try to let the production designer or the director and how they want to style the room, let them take that over. But I try to keep it very concise, probably 1 to 2 to 3 lines max on descriptions.
How does genre impact the descriptions that you write?
That's a great question. I think with horror writing, I think it's horror and thriller writing. I think it's trying to make the reader feel that creep and that dread. So sometimes with that, I think it's pacing things in the script, maybe a little bit slower. Maybe it is describing, the ambience of the room, or kind of building those creepy moments just to really set the mood. And I think with an action film, when you're writing fast-paced action scenes, I think it is about making the descriptions really kind of snappy, so the reader can kind of move through the page, and it is like an action film where you won't necessarily see something coming, and then they turn the page, it's like boom, So I think this genre does just define how you're writing something. With a Western, you wanted to be able to describe those big wide open spaces and let the reader really feel that. Yeah.
How do you incorporate visual elements or action into a screenplay?
Yeah, I mean, I think with me, it's in the script. I think it's making sure that always thinking about someone reading it, making sure they're interested. So whether it's bolding something or putting caps on something to really drive their interest in there, and then I think with action, it's just making it fast read, making it fun to read. So with like the genre of action writing, I don't necessarily want to read a massive block of text like that when I'm describing a big action scene. So I try to keep it short, try to keep it moving. Yeah.